Okay, this is a review for the Week 4 osteology information. You can push pause and just try to identify each of the structures numbered. Number 1, this is the alveolar process for the maxillary bone. This is our anterior nasal spine. Number 2. Number 3, this is the zygomatic process of the maxillary bone. Up here, number 4, we can see it just beside the nasal bone, and it continues all the way down into the maxillary bone. So we know that this is the frontal process of the maxillary bone. Number 5 is going to be our infraorbital foramen. Just some other things that we can see here is our supraorbital foramen. We can see our nasal bones here and here. We can see parts of the sphenoid bone. We can see part of the superior oblique fissure in there as well too. We can also see just right here this little foramen. That is the zygomatico-orbital foramen right there. Okay, so push pause, try to name these. All right, number 1 is the palatine process of the maxillary bone. Number 4 is going to be our incisive foramen. Number 2 is on the palatine bone. So remember, the palatine bone is all of this stuff right through here. And on the palatine bone, we can see the greater and then the lesser palatine foramens. Remember, the greater will be slightly anterior, and the palatine bone will be separated by this sutural line that we see through there. There are some other structures we can see here as well. We can see our basilar suture here in this place. We can see right there is our pharyngeal tubercle. We can also see some different openings in the skull as well too. I'm going to keep going. Okay, so push pause, try to identify these. So number 1, this is the frontal process of the maxillary bone. Number 2, we have our infraorbital foramen. Number 3 is our anterior nasal spine. Number 4, this is our zygomaticofacial foramen. Now, part of this bone is broken off, so the rest of the bone should be like kind of right here. We have number 5 as the frontal process of the zygomatic bone, and remember, we would then see our sutural line that would separate it. Number 6 is just the zygomatic bone itself here, so there's the zygomatic bone. If it's the piece right before the sutural line, we would say that that is the maxillary process of the zygomatic bone. Number 7 is our lacrimal canal, because it's bordered by this, which is the lacrimal bone. We can also see our ethmoid bone back here as well too, right? So we can see that as well. And again, we can see our nasal bone. The opening we see right through there is our supraorbital foramen. Right. Okay, from this view, the foramen that we want to see is inside the orbit of the eye. So number 1, this is the zygomatico-orbital foramen. Number 2 is just pointing at the lacrimal canal. Remember, that's going to be found in the lacrimal bone. So we would see this nice sutural line that would end the nasal bones. These are the nasal bones. We then would see our frontal process of our maxillary bone in this area. And then we would see the lacrimal bone just right there beside it. Okay, now from this image, we can see this part of the zygomatic process of the temporal bone. We can also see the temporal process of the zygomatic bone. And then, of course, together they make the arch, or the zygomatic arch. Now, behind this frontal process of the zygomatic bone is the location of the zygomatico-temporal foramen. Here on the mandible, we can see the condyle of the mandible, also just the head of the mandible. We can also see the neck of the mandible. Number 3 is the mandibular notch. Number 4 is the coronoid process. Number 5 is pointing at this foramen, which is our mandibular foramen. Remember, outlining that will be the lingula. This line that we see right through here is our line for our mylohyoid, or our mylohyoid line. Number 7, this is the ramus. And then we can also see the body right here of the mandible. Number 6 is going to be our mental foramen, and of course right here we could say that this is our mental protuberance as well. Right, on this model we have those same structures highlighted. Now from the back side, let's add this one other structure. You see this number 1 right through here? This is from the masseter muscle attaching to the angle, or the gonial angle of the mandible. So this is the masseteric tuberosities. So the angle is this part, but the masseteric tuberosities will be the bumps that you will see right there. Now on the back, number 1, push pause just for a second. Number 1 is going to be the lingula. 2 is the mandibular foramen. This is the pterygoid tuberosities. Remember, this is the angle, the bumps right there here. And number 4, those bumps are the actual tuberosities. Okay, so again, the angle is this. the gonial angle. These bumps that you see right through here, those are the pterygoid tuberosities. Number 3 is our mylohyoid line. Number 5 is our mental spine, where we see the screw right here. Number 6 is the location of our digastric fossa, and then again at number 7 we can see the gonial angle associated with the mandible. Here we can see some other structures. Just go through and try to label them. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4. We'll say number 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, so 6 is where we're going to see here the masseteric tuberosity. Number 1 is just pointing at the ramus. Number 2 is that oblique line of the mandible. 3 is the body. 4 is at the mental protuberance. 5 is our coronoid process. 6 is our mandibular notch. 7 is the head of the mandible, or the condyle of the mandible. Number 8 is where we're going to see the neck of the mandible. This is just an inferior view for the jaw. If that helps you, you can take a look at that so you can identify structures. The main thing I wanted to see on here was this lingula. So here you can see this nice big thing surrounding the mandibular foramen. That structure is the lingula. Just erase that way you can see it if you'd like to. Again, this is just another presentation of the same structures. Here we can see the inner ear ossicles. The inner ear ossicles, I just identify 1, 2, 3 as the the MIS bones. So this is the malleus, this is the incus, and this is the stapes bone. So the MIS bones, and we'll see those in lab this week. Here are the sinuses. Number 1 is at the maxillary sinus. Number 2 is actually showing the ethmoidal air cells, these round circular structures we see there. We'll see the rest in just a minute. Here we can see our frontal sinus. Remember, it's inside the frontal bone. Here we can see our sphenoid sinus, which we know it's there because we can see the sella turcica right through there. Okay, same thing, frontal sinus, sphenoid sinus. See those through there. We can see the perpendicular plate of the ethmoid bone, the vomer. We can see the maxillary bone, palatine bone here, cristagalli, and then of course this would be the cribriform plate. Okay, here with the ribs, we can see how the ribs kind of angle down. Remember, ribs 1 through 7, those are our true ribs. 8 through 10, those are our false ribs. 11 through 12, these guys are going to be our floating ribs through there. Okay, here in the front, we can see the manubrium. So this is the manubrium through here. And the manubrium is going to have this jugular notch, which is this area right through here. The clavicular notch is what we'll see here. This is the sternal body. And then this is the xiphoid process. This is the manubriosternal joint. This is the xiphi-sternal joint. Okay. We can also look on this model to see the sinuses, and here we can see our frontal sinus. Here we can see our sphenoidal sinus, and if we remove this part right through here, we can see our ethmoidal air cells. Here we can see our rib. This is the head of the rib. Over here we can see a little bump. That's the tubercle of the rib. Here we can see the angle of the rib, and then underneath it is where we're going to see the little sub groove of the rib, subcostal groove. Here's the tubercle. Here's the head. This is the location of where the facet would be. And then that should be it for our week 4 structures for osteology.